Clara Whitmore stood at the edge of Ashford, her childhood town, feeling the weight of its quiet beauty settle around her like a thick fog. It had been years since she'd left, her life now intertwined with the world of architecture, but the pull of her roots had brought her back. She had no intention of staying long, just a quick visit to settle her father's affairs. But standing here, at the crossroads of past and present, the town felt like a puzzle she hadn't yet solved. Her childhood home was long gone, replaced by new construction. Ashford, once an epitome of old-world charm, now wore the tired signs of time's passage. Yet, Ashford Hall remained untouched by the march of time, standing proudly at the heart of the town like a silent sentinel. The hall was as imposing as ever, its tall, intricate stone walls covered in ivy, and its large windows dark, reflecting only the ghosts of the past. Ashford Hall was a place of legends. Clara's great-grandfather, an eccentric and brilliant architect, had designed it. It was his crowning achievement, his life's work, and yet, in all the years she'd spent avoiding it, Clara had never truly understood the meaning behind the building. No one had. Her great-grandfather had left behind blueprints, but they didn't seem to explain much, just layers of architectural lines and geometric shapes. But there was something else, something unspoken, buried within those plans, something everyone had always been too afraid to ask about. The symbols etched into Ashford Hall were the first clue. For as long as Clara could remember, people had talked about them in whispers. Strange symbols, almost like hieroglyphs, carved into the stone pillars and windowsills of the hall, scattered across the building's facade like a hidden language. As a child, Clara's father had dismissed them as artistic flourishes, but she'd always suspected there was more to it. Now, years later, the blueprints she had inherited had reignited her curiosity. She couldn't ignore it any longer. She had to know. The wind picked up, and Clara's fingers grazed the cold, weathered stone of Ashford Hall's front door as she stood before it. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, telling her stories of her great-grandfather and his obsession with infusing architecture with meaning. It was said that he had believed buildings could tell stories, stories of the people who lived within them, stories of the world that shaped them. And it was those stories that Clara now sought to uncover. With a deep breath, she stepped inside. The interior of Ashford Hall was even more awe-inspiring than she had remembered. The grand staircase that spiraled upwards, the sweeping arches that reached toward the high ceilings, the intricate carvings that adorned every corner, it was a masterpiece, but one that felt abandoned, forgotten. As she walked deeper into the hall, Clara could almost feel her great-grandfather's presence, lingering like a shadow in the rafters. She moved to the farthest corner of the room, where the largest symbol was carved into the wall. A sprawling design of interwoven lines, it was beautiful, but there was a heaviness to it, as though it were meant to be read, not simply admired. Clara ran her fingers over the grooves of the symbol, tracing each curve and line as though she were unlocking a secret. The air around her seemed to hum, charged with a sense of anticipation, as if the building itself was waiting for her to understand. This symbol wasn't just decoration, it was a message, Clara realized. Her great-grandfather had created a hidden language within the stone, something beyond art or design. She didn't know yet what it meant, but she was certain it was no accident. Her mind raced with possibilities, and she knew she had to start somewhere. She would need more than just the blueprints her father had left behind. She would need to look at Ashford through a new lens, one that connected the dots between these symbols, the architectural movements of the time, and the life her great-grandfather had led. It wouldn't be easy. The people in Ashford had long since stopped caring about these symbols, dismissing them as part of the town's fading past. But Clara wasn't like them. She wasn't ready to let the story fade away. As Clara made her way through the darkened halls of Ashford Hall, she felt an inexplicable pull toward a large bookcase against the far wall. It had always been there, gathering dust, but today, it seemed to beckon her. She moved toward it, her hand reaching for the top shelf, where a weathered leather-bound book sat, hidden behind rows of old volumes. She pulled it out, the book's spine creaking in protest, and opened it. The pages were filled with intricate sketches of Ashford Hall, along with notes in her great-grandfather's handwriting. They were filled with references to the very symbols she had been tracing, symbols that seemed to relate not just to the hall's architecture, but to a deeper, almost forgotten aspect of American history. Clara's heart quickened as she turned the pages, her fingers trembling as she read the first line, "The language of the stones is the language of the soul. If you listen closely, they will speak to you." Her great-grandfather had left her a trail, a roadmap through the forgotten past. And now, it was time to follow it. Clara sat in the dimly lit study, the book open in front of her, its pages filled with the kind of obscure knowledge she had long since stopped expecting to find. Her great-grandfather's notes were cryptic, laced with metaphors and historical references that at first made little sense. The symbols on Ashford Hall were tied to something bigger, something that had once been known but had been deliberately buried over time. She felt like she was holding the key to a mystery that stretched beyond architecture. It was a story of revolution, of art, and of the ideals that shaped America's early 20th century. As Clara absorbed the pages of notes, her mind began to piece together a pattern. Each symbol carved into the hall wasn't just random art or decorative flourish, it was a representation of a philosophical movement, one that sought to challenge the industrialization and mass production that was sweeping through the country. In the midst of this economic boom, her great-grandfather had chosen to look inward, questioning not just what America was becoming, but what it had lost in the process. The symbols were more than just a protest against the mechanization of society. They were a celebration of the human spirit, an exploration of freedom, creativity, and the power of individual expression. Her great-grandfather had believed that architecture wasn't just about creating functional spaces, it was about creating living stories, breathing monuments to the people who inhabited them. His designs, Clara now realized, were not meant to be understood at first glance. They were meant to be decoded, over time, by those who would come after him, but the deeper Clara dug, the more questions arose. Why had her great-grandfather chosen Ashford Hall as the site for these cryptic messages? What had Ashford, a small town, done to deserve such an honor? Clara's thoughts drifted to the town's founding. Ashford had once been a thriving hub of intellectuals and artists, a place where the ideals of the past mingled with the radical ideas of the future. But over time, it had slipped into obscurity, its greatness forgotten, its rich history overshadowed by modern developments. Clara rose from the study table, feeling a restless energy building within her. She needed to see Ashford with fresh eyes, to understand its significance in her great-grandfather's work. As she walked through the town square, she couldn't help but notice the small details she had missed during her childhood. The ironwork on the lampposts, the intricate carvings on the town's clock tower, the stained glass windows of the old library, each of these elements, like Ashford Hall, carried the same enigmatic symbols. The town, she realized, was not merely a backdrop for her great-grandfather's architecture, it was a living canvas, a testament to his vision. But the more Clara observed, the more she noticed something unsettling. The symbols, once thought to be artistic quirks, now seemed to be hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone to uncover them. She couldn't shake the feeling that the town itself held more secrets than it let on, that these symbols were part of something much larger than a singular building. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden, unexpected encounter. As she was walking past the library, an elderly man called out to her. His voice, raspy with age, but filled with a knowing edge, stopped her in her tracks. "Clara Whitmore," the man said, his face weathered with age but his eyes sharp as ever. "I was wondering when you'd show up." Clara turned to face him, surprised. "Do I know you?" The man smiled, though it was more of a grimace than a grin. "I'm Thomas Avery. I knew your great-grandfather. We were close, back in the day. And I've been waiting for you to come around." Clara's heart skipped a beat. "You knew him? But how?" Thomas raised a hand to stop her. "There's no time for questions, not yet. You're looking for answers, but some things aren't meant to be uncovered all at once. I'll help you, but you need to understand the risks. These symbols, they're not just decorative. They're tied to something much older, something much darker than you might expect." Clara's curiosity deepened. "What do you mean? What is all this about?" Thomas's eyes flicked around nervously, as though expecting someone to overhear them. He stepped closer and lowered his voice. There's a reason your great-grandfather kept these secrets, Clara. The symbols are a map, a guide to an old society that once held sway over this country, a society that your grandfather was part of. Ashford wasn't just a town to him, it was the heart of something much larger. And he built Ashford Hall as a key to understanding that legacy. But now that you're here, you need to be careful. There are others who would go to great lengths to stop you from uncovering the truth. Clara's mind raced. She had suspected as much, the feeling that there was more to her great-grandfather's work than met the eye. But now, the stakes felt much higher. Who else was involved in this hidden history? And why was Thomas, a man who had known her great-grandfather, so afraid? Thomas hesitated for a moment before continuing. Your great-grandfather was part of a group, a secret society of architects, philosophers, and intellectuals. They believed that architecture could save America from the soul-crushing grip of industrialization. But the more they tried to share their ideas, the more powerful forces moved to suppress them. Ashford Hall was supposed to be their last stand, their final message to the world. But your great-grandfather didn't finish the work he started. That's where you come in. Clara's breath caught in her throat. What do you mean, finish the work? Thomas looked at her gravely. The symbols are the key. If you can decode them, you'll unlock the next step in the society's plan. But be warned, Clara, some truths are too dangerous to reveal. And once you start down this path, there's no turning back. This section introduces a new character, Thomas Avery, who hints at a deeper, more secretive history surrounding Ashford Hall and Clara's great-grandfather. It also raises the stakes, suggesting that Clara's quest is not just a personal journey, but one that involves hidden societies and potentially dangerous revelations. Clara stood frozen, the weight of Thomas Avery's words pressing heavily on her chest. The town, once a quiet place of her childhood memories, had suddenly transformed into a labyrinth of secrets and untold histories. Her great-grandfather, whom she had always thought of as a simple, eccentric architect, was now a key player in something far more complex, a hidden society, a vision to reshape America, and symbols that spoke of something beyond architecture itself. The quiet walls of Ashford Hall no longer felt like mere structures to her, they felt like a warning. Thomas's voice broke the silence, a gravelly whisper that sent a chill down Clara's spine. There are people who've been watching you, Clara. I can tell you've already started to piece things together, but you need to understand this isn't just about architecture. It's about power. Influence. A network of people who will stop at nothing to protect the secrets your grandfather tried to leave behind. Clara glanced around, half expecting someone to be lurking in the shadows. But the street was quiet, the usual hum of life replaced by an uneasy stillness that only seemed to heighten the tension. What kind of people are you talking about? Thomas hesitated, his eyes scanning the empty square. There's a society, known only to those initiated into it. Your grandfather was their leader, though he never called it that. They were known as the Architects of Tomorrow. Their goal was to reshape America's future through architecture, to create a new world order built on the principles of freedom, expression, and creative thought. But as they gained more influence, they became a threat to the establishment, the industrial forces, the political elites. Your grandfather's designs were a form of resistance, a blueprint for change. Clara's mind spun. The Architects of Tomorrow. A name that sounded more like a secret cult than a group of intellectuals. She had always known her great-grandfather was ahead of his time, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. Why did he stop? Why didn't he finish what he started? Clara asked, her voice trembling with a mix of curiosity and fear. Thomas looked pained, his wrinkled hands clasped tightly in front of him. Because they came for him. The people who didn't want change. They tried to discredit him, ruin his reputation. They drove him to the brink of madness. He realized that if he continued, he would be silenced, permanently. So, he hid his most important work here, in Ashford Hall. He left behind the symbols, the blueprints, as a puzzle for someone to solve. But no one ever had the courage to finish it. Clara felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The hall, the blueprints, the symbols, her great-grandfather had hidden his final legacy in plain sight. And now, it was up to her to uncover it. Who are these people, Thomas? The ones who want to keep these secrets buried? Clara's voice was steady now, her resolve beginning to form. She would not let her great-grandfather's work be lost to time. I can't say for sure, Thomas replied, his gaze drifting toward the horizon. But I've seen the signs. They operate in the shadows. They're everywhere, but you'll never see them until it's too late. They have their eyes on you now, Clara. You're getting too close to the truth. Clara shook her head, frustration bubbling up inside her. I didn't ask for this, Thomas. I just came back to understand my family's past, to make sense of it. I didn't realize it would lead me to all of this. You're not just uncovering your grandfather's legacy, Thomas said softly. You're standing at the crossroads of history. This town, Ashford, it's the key. The symbols are only the beginning. Once you decode them, the next part of the puzzle will be laid out for you. Clara stared at him, the enormity of his words weighing on her. The quiet town she thought she knew, the place she had once left behind, was now the center of a conspiracy she hadn't even known existed. Yet, as strange and daunting as it seemed, Clara felt the pull of destiny. She was already too deep into this mystery to back out now. I'll continue, Clara said, her voice firm, her heart resolute. I'll uncover the truth. But I need your help. Thomas nodded slowly, the weight of his own secrets heavy in his expression. I'll help you, but you must be careful. There are people who would kill to stop you from finding out what your grandfather left behind. If you're serious about finishing his work, you need to be prepared for what's coming. Clara's pulse quickened as she processed his words. She wasn't sure if she was ready for what lay ahead, but there was no turning back. She had already taken the first step into a world far beyond her understanding, and now, she had to see it through. The two of them parted ways that evening, each of them walking away with the understanding that the days ahead would be filled with more danger, more mystery, and more revelation than either of them could have imagined. The next morning, Clara returned to Ashford Hall. The place that had once been a symbol of her great-grandfather's triumph now felt like the starting point of something much larger. She stood before the entrance, the symbols carved into the stone now beckoning her forward like a challenge. There was no more room for doubt, she had to decode the secrets within these walls. With a deep breath, she pushed open the heavy door and stepped inside. The hall was empty, save for the dust that seemed to cover everything. But Clara knew that beneath the layers of time and neglect, the answers she sought were waiting. She could feel them, like an electric current running through the very air she breathed. The symbols were calling to her. And this time, Clara Whitmore would not rest until she unlocked their meaning. This section deepens the mystery and raises the stakes, revealing the hidden society and the dangerous forces that are trying to keep the truth buried. Clara's commitment to uncovering her great-grandfather's legacy grows stronger, and the path ahead becomes even more perilous. The silence inside Ashford Hall felt suffocating. The air was thick with the dust of ages, untouched and undisturbed, as if the building had been waiting for Clara's return. The once grand architecture now seemed like a relic, its beauty buried under layers of neglect. Yet Clara felt a strange sense of purpose as she stepped deeper into the heart of her great-grandfather's work. She was no longer just a visitor in the town, she was a part of something much bigger, a story that had been left unfinished for decades, one that only she could now complete. She moved toward the center of the hall, where a large marble column stood. It was one of the few structures in the building that had not been overwhelmed by the creeping ivy. The intricate carvings on the column had always fascinated her as a child, though she hadn't known then that they were more than just ornamental. Now, standing before it, she could see the symbols more clearly, interlocking circles, sharp angles, and strange, almost alien shapes that seemed to pulse with meaning. Clara's fingers traced the edges of the carvings, her mind racing with the knowledge Thomas had shared. These weren't just random designs, they were part of a grand, hidden narrative, each symbol a piece of a puzzle waiting to be solved. Her great-grandfather had created them deliberately, knowing that one day someone would need to decode their meaning. And that someone, Clara now understood, was her. As she moved along the column, her eyes caught something new, a small indentation in the stone, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Clara had learned to trust her instincts. She pressed her palm against it, and to her surprise, the stone gave way, revealing a hidden compartment within the column. Clara's breath caught in her throat as she pulled the compartment open. Inside, she found a small, leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. It was her great-grandfather's handwriting, neat and precise, and it looked like a treasure trove of information waiting to be uncovered. She opened the journal carefully, feeling the weight of the moment. This was the first real clue she had found, the key to unlocking the meaning behind the symbols. The first entry was dated nearly 40 years ago, just before her great-grandfather's retirement. It read, "The time has come to leave behind the final key. Ashford Hall is the culmination of everything I have believed in, a testament to a future that must be preserved. The symbols I have carved into the walls are not mere decoration, they are a language, a map, a guide to understanding the true purpose of this building. The true architects of tomorrow will come when the time is right. I have hidden the most important part of this puzzle within the walls of Ashford Hall. When the right person comes, they will know where to look. Trust the symbols. They will guide you." Clara's heart raced as she absorbed the words. The symbols were more than just a cryptic message, they were a map to something hidden inside Ashford Hall, something that could change everything. But where would she find the next piece of the puzzle? She continued reading, each entry providing more insight into her great-grandfather's vision. He had been a part of something larger than just architecture, he had been a part of a movement, a group of thinkers who had believed in reshaping society through the built environment. The society had been clandestine, operating in the shadows, pushing for a vision of America that was more artistic, more human, and less driven by industrial greed. The symbols were the keys to that vision. As Clara read, she began to understand that her great-grandfather had not just been a creator, he had been a messenger, someone who had chosen to communicate his ideas through his buildings and their hidden meanings. He had left behind a roadmap, not just for his family, but for future generations, an invitation for them to uncover the truth about America's architectural past and its potential future. The more Clara read, the more she realized that the journal wasn't just a set of instructions, it was a call to action. Her great-grandfather had hidden a treasure trove of knowledge, a legacy meant to be rediscovered. The symbols weren't just about art or rebellion, they were about hope. Hope for a better future, one where creativity and individuality would triumph over conformity and mass production, but there was still so much Clara didn't understand. She had decoded some of the symbols, but there were others, more complex, more abstract, that she couldn't make sense of. The journal was only the beginning. The real challenge would be finding the remaining pieces of the puzzle. Clara closed the journal and carefully returned it to the hidden compartment. She couldn't help but feel that her great-grandfather was watching her, guiding her towards something that would change her life, and the life of Ashford, forever. She was no longer just a passive observer in this story. She was part of it, and it was up to her to complete the journey he had started. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Clara spent hours in Ashford Hall, retracing her great-grandfather's steps, studying the symbols with a new sense of purpose. Every time she thought she was close to understanding, another layer of complexity seemed to unfold before her eyes. But with each breakthrough came a new question, a new mystery that only deepened her resolve. As the sun began to set, Clara stepped outside, taking a moment to breathe in the cool evening air. The town, so quiet and seemingly ordinary, now seemed alive with hidden meaning. The symbols, the journal, Ashford Hall, they were all connected, all part of a larger narrative that only she could understand, and then, as she looked toward the horizon, Clara saw it. A familiar shape, partially obscured by the trees, the old clock tower at the center of the town square. The carvings on its base, she realized, were the same as the ones on the walls of Ashford Hall. She hadn't noticed them before, but now, they were impossible to ignore. She knew where she had to go next. With renewed determination, Clara turned toward the clock tower. She had no idea what she would find there, but she knew one thing for certain, the next clue was waiting for her. And she wasn't going to stop until she uncovered the entire truth. This section brings Clara closer to her goal, revealing more about her great-grandfather's legacy and the mystery that surrounds Ashford Hall. The journey is far from over, but Clara's understanding is deepening, and she's now more determined than ever to uncover the full story. The town square was bathed in the soft, golden light of the setting sun as Clara made her way toward the clock tower. She could feel the pull of the symbols guiding her, just as they had pulled her deeper into the mystery of Ashford Hall. The clock tower had always been an iconic part of Ashford, towering over the town like a sentinel, but Clara had never paid close attention to the details. Not until now. As she approached the base of the clock tower, Clara's eyes immediately fell upon the carvings. The symbols were not as intricate as those in Ashford Hall, but they were unmistakably similar: circular patterns, sharp angles, and what appeared to be a series of interconnected lines. They weren't just decorative, they seemed to follow a rhythm, a structure that spoke to something deeper, something hidden. Her fingers traced the worn carvings on the stone, each line pulsing with meaning, as if it were alive, waiting for her to unlock its secret. The more she studied them, the more she realized that the symbols here were not just a repetition of what she had seen in Ashford Hall, they were the final piece of the puzzle. The clock tower, she now understood, was part of her great-grandfather's design, a companion to the hall, and it held the key to understanding the full scope of his vision. Clara knelt down and examined the carvings more closely. In the center of the stone, there was an unusual indentation, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. With her heart pounding, she pressed her fingers into the indentation. A small click echoed in the quiet square, and part of the base of the clock tower shifted, revealing a hidden compartment. Clara's breath caught in her throat as she opened it. Inside was a small metal box, its surface tarnished with age but still solid and intact. Clara's hands trembled as she lifted it out of the compartment and carefully opened it. Inside was another journal, this one much smaller than the one she had found in Ashford Hall. But it wasn't the size that mattered, it was the handwriting inside. The same neat, precise script as before, her great-grandfather's notes. The first page of the journal was marked with a date, September 14, 1923. The time has come to leave behind the final key. The clock tower, like Ashford Hall, is a part of the story. It is the culmination of my life's work. The symbols you have followed lead to this moment. The map is complete, but the path is still hidden. The answer lies within the heart of this town, but it is not a place you can see. It is a place you must feel. The journey has only just begun. Clara's pulse quickened as she absorbed the words. The clock tower, her great-grandfather had written, was a culmination, but the journey wasn't over. The final key was still hidden, and she had no idea where to look next. What did he mean by the heart of this town? And why was the path hidden? Her mind raced as she thought back to everything she had learned so far. The symbols, the blueprints, the journal entries, they were all leading her somewhere, but to what? The more she thought about it, the more she realized that the symbols were not just part of a secret architectural language. They were guiding her to something deeper, something rooted in Ashford's very foundation. Her great-grandfather's vision had always been about reshaping the world, using architecture to challenge the status quo, to create spaces that inspired change. But what had he truly been trying to build? Clara stood up, her eyes scanning the square. She could feel it, like a faint, distant echo. The town wasn't just a backdrop to her grandfather's work. It was the canvas, the living, breathing heart of the vision he had tried to leave behind. The symbols were more than just hidden messages, they were instructions for bringing that vision to life. And she was the one chosen to complete it. Her thoughts were interrupted by a voice behind her. "You're getting closer, Clara." Clara turned sharply to see Thomas Avery standing at the edge of the square, his face drawn with concern. He had been watching her, following her movements, perhaps knowing that she was getting too close to something he couldn't fully explain. But Clara wasn't afraid anymore. She had come this far, and she wasn't about to stop now. "Thomas," she said, her voice steady. "I found it. The final journal, the clock tower, everything is connected. It's not just about the buildings, is it? It's about something more." Something that goes beyond architecture. Thomas stepped closer, his eyes filled with a mix of admiration and fear. You're right. It's not just about architecture. It never was. Your great-grandfather was building something bigger. He was building a movement. A new way of thinking, a new vision for the future. The symbols, the designs, they're not just artistic expression. They're a language. A way to communicate the ideals of the architects of tomorrow. Clara felt a surge of energy, a realization that had been building within her for days. And I'm the one who has to finish it. To complete what he started. Thomas nodded gravely. Yes. But you need to understand, Clara, there are forces who will stop at nothing to prevent this from happening. You've already seen the symbols, but the real power lies in the way those symbols will come together. Once you decipher the final piece, you'll have everything you need to unlock the truth. But the people who are watching you, they'll do everything they can to make sure that doesn't happen. Clara looked at him, a flicker of doubt in her eyes. What should I do now? Follow the symbols, Thomas said softly. The path will reveal itself, but you have to be ready. You have to trust in your grandfather's vision. He left you the key, but it's up to you to unlock it. Clara looked at the clock tower once more, its face illuminated by the setting sun, casting long shadows across the town square. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her, the responsibility to finish her great-grandfather's work, to complete the vision he had started all those years ago, and with that thought, Clara made her decision. She would not stop. She would follow the symbols, decode their meaning, and uncover the final piece of the puzzle. The legacy of the architects of tomorrow would not be lost. Not on her watch. Clara stood at the edge of Ashford Square, the weight of Thomas's words still fresh in her mind. As she glanced back at the clock tower, she felt an unsettling mix of excitement and apprehension. Her great-grandfather's legacy was much more than she had ever imagined, and the more she uncovered, the more she realized how little she truly understood about his vision. But she knew one thing, she couldn't stop now. The symbols, the journals, the hidden compartments, they were all pieces of a larger puzzle, a puzzle she was determined to solve, but as much as Clara felt the pull to continue, she also felt the shadow of something darker, something far more dangerous, closing in on her. Thomas had warned her about the forces who would stop at nothing to keep the truth buried. Who were they? And why did they care so much about Ashford's past? Her thoughts were interrupted by the distant sound of a car engine. She turned to see an unfamiliar black sedan pulling up to the square. The vehicle stopped, and two men stepped out. They wore dark suits, their faces unreadable. As they walked toward her, Clara's stomach tightened. She didn't need to ask who they were. She could feel their presence, like a threat in the air. These were the people Thomas had warned her about. The ones who would do whatever it took to prevent her from discovering the truth. She took a step back, instinctively moving toward the shadow of the clock tower, hoping to blend into the backdrop of the town. The two men didn't seem to notice her immediately. They stood near the base of the clock tower, speaking in low tones. Clara strained to hear their conversation, but their words were muffled. She knew she had to act quickly. She couldn't allow them to see her, not yet. After a few moments, the men turned and walked back to their car. Clara waited until the car disappeared down the road, the dust settling behind it like a lingering memory. Her heart was racing, and her mind was spinning. The closer she got to the truth, the more dangerous things seemed to become. She wasn't just unlocking her great-grandfather's secrets, she was stepping into a world of hidden power, one where there were people who would do anything to keep the past buried. Shaking off her fear, Clara made her way back to Ashford Hall. She needed to focus. The journal she had found had given her new direction. It had led her to the clock tower, and now she had to follow through. The final piece of the puzzle was still hidden somewhere in the town. But where? What did her great-grandfather mean when he wrote that the answer lies within the heart of this town? Clara stood in front of the massive wooden doors of Ashford Hall, the place where it all began. As she pushed the door open, a rush of memories flooded her, memories of her childhood, of her father, of the town she had tried to leave behind. But this time, the hall felt different. It wasn't just a house filled with dust and silence. It was alive with purpose, with secrets waiting to be uncovered. She walked through the familiar halls, her footsteps echoing in the empty spaces. Every room, every corner of Ashford Hall felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for her to unlock its mysteries. Clara moved toward the central hall, the largest room in the house, where her great-grandfather had once worked late into the night, drafting plans and making decisions that would shape the future of Ashford. In the center of the room stood the grand fireplace, its stone carvings worn smooth by time. But it was the mantelpiece above the fire that caught her attention now. There, hidden beneath the soot and dust, was a small, inconspicuous engraving, one she had never noticed before. It was subtle, but unmistakable. The same symbol she had seen in the clock tower. The same pattern that had appeared in Ashford Hall. It was a circle, intersected by sharp lines, with an intricate series of smaller shapes radiating from its core. This was it. The final clue. Clara's heart pounded in her chest as she knelt down and brushed the dust away from the engraving. She could feel the heat of the fire that once blazed in the hearth, the warmth of her great-grandfather's passion for his work, still lingering in the air. She knew now that this was the heart of the town, this was where it all began. With a steady hand, she pressed the engraving. To her surprise, the entire mantelpiece slid away, revealing a hidden compartment. Clara's breath caught as she reached inside and pulled out an old, leather-bound book. This was no ordinary book. The cover was adorned with the same symbol she had been following, a perfect match to the ones she had seen at Ashford Hall, on the clock tower, and throughout the town. The book was thick, its pages yellowed with age. As Clara opened it, she realized it was a journal, not her great-grandfather's, but someone else's. Someone who had been a part of the architects of tomorrow. The handwriting was elegant, looping in a way that suggested a refined, intellectual mind. The pages were filled with notes, sketches, and references to the symbols she had been studying. Clara quickly flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning the text. The journal was filled with intricate designs, each one leading to the next, like a roadmap of Ashford's hidden history. But the most striking page was the last one. At the bottom, there was a note written in bold, urgent handwriting: the key to understanding the future lies in the symbols. When the time comes, they will reveal the path forward. But remember, knowledge is power. And power always comes at a cost. The weight of the words sank in. Clara wasn't just uncovering the past. She was standing on the precipice of something monumental. The legacy of the architects of tomorrow was not just about buildings and designs, it was about changing the future, about using architecture to inspire a new world order. And Clara was the one chosen to complete it. As she closed the journal, Clara felt a strange sense of finality, as though she had reached the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. The journey wasn't over, not by a long shot. But the next step was clear. The symbols had led her here, and now, she had everything she needed to finish what her great-grandfather had started. But as Clara stood in the quiet of Ashford Hall, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone, was watching her, waiting for her to make the next move. The road ahead would be dangerous, but Clara was ready. She had come this far, and she wasn't about to stop now. Clara sat on the cold stone floor of Ashford Hall, the journal resting in her lap. Her hands trembled as she processed the weight of what she had uncovered. The final clue had led her here, this ancient, forgotten space beneath the fireplace, but as she glanced around, the walls of Ashford Hall seemed to close in around her, heavy with the burden of knowledge. The symbols had revealed themselves in their own time, but now, the time had come for her to fully understand their meaning. She could feel it, an undeniable pull towards something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface of the town she had once called home. Ashford wasn't just a place of history, it was the epicenter of a revolution, one that had remained dormant for decades, waiting for someone with the courage to awaken it. And Clara had been chosen to carry the torch. The journal in her lap felt like a living thing, its pages speaking directly to her. The handwriting, elegant and full of purpose, called her to act. She could no longer be passive in this story, the fate of Ashford, and perhaps something much greater, rested in her hands. Her great-grandfather's legacy was clear. He had intended to create more than just buildings. He had meant to create a new vision for the future, a future that could only be realized if the symbols were fully understood and the path forward revealed, but the path was not without danger. Clara thought back to the men she had seen outside the clock tower, the ones who had followed her, watched her from the shadows. Whoever they were not simply curious about her discoveries. They wanted to stop her, to keep the secrets buried, just as Thomas had warned. The air in Ashford Hall was thick with tension, as though the building itself was holding its breath, waiting for her next move. Clara stood up, the journal clasped tightly in her hands. She had to move forward. The symbols on the clock tower, the hidden compartments in Ashford Hall, the journals, they were all pieces of a much larger puzzle. And now, she was on the brink of solving it. She walked toward the center of the hall, the place where her great-grandfather had once worked tirelessly, and stopped in front of the grand staircase. Her eyes scanned the intricate carvings that lined the steps, each one different, each one telling a piece of the story. It was here that the final part of the puzzle had to be unlocked. As Clara moved closer, she noticed something strange. The carvings on the steps were not static. They seemed to shift as she moved, almost imperceptibly. The patterns, which had once seemed random, now appeared to align with the symbols she had seen before, those that decorated Ashford Hall, the clock tower, and the journal. They formed a continuous loop, one that spiraled inward, leading her deeper into the heart of the building. With a deep breath, Clara reached out and touched the first step. The moment her fingers made contact, the symbols shifted, revealing a hidden passageway beneath the stairs. Clara's heart raced as she descended into the darkness, the journal still pressed tightly against her chest. This was it, the final step. She was about to uncover the truth her great-grandfather had left behind, and she could feel the weight of it all pressing down on her. The passage led to a small, dimly lit room. At its center was a pedestal, and on that pedestal sat an object covered by a cloth. Clara approached cautiously, her breath catching in her throat. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and dust, and the silence was almost deafening. She reached out, her fingers trembling as she pulled back the cloth. What lay beneath it took Clara's breath away. It was a small, intricately carved key, a key that shimmered in the dim light, as though it held the power to unlock something much greater. She had seen this key before, or rather, she had seen its shape, etched into the symbols, embedded in the design of Ashford Hall, and scattered throughout the town. It had always been there, a silent sentinel, waiting for someone to claim it. Clara picked up the key, its weight surprisingly heavy in her hand. She could feel its significance, its power. This was the key her great-grandfather had hidden away, the one that would unlock the final stage of the architects of tomorrow's vision. The journey wasn't just about deciphering the symbols or uncovering the past, it was about unlocking the future, but Clara knew that taking the key was only the beginning. The forces who had been watching her, the ones who wanted to keep the past buried, would stop at nothing to prevent her from completing her mission. They would come for her, just as they had come for her great-grandfather. As she stood there in the quiet, shadowed room, Clara realized that the road ahead would be the most dangerous of all. She was no longer just uncovering secrets, she was now the keeper of those secrets. And the truth, she understood, had the power to change everything. It was no longer just about Ashford or her great-grandfather's legacy. It was about the future of the world, and whether or not she had the courage to see it through. With the key in her hand and her resolve stronger than ever, Clara turned and walked back toward the stairs. She knew what had to be done. The symbols had led her this far, and now, she had to use the key to unlock the next step in the journey. She wasn't just completing a puzzle anymore, she was starting a revolution. As she emerged from the passageway, the first rays of dawn began to break over Ashford. The town, still sleeping, was unaware of the storm that was coming. Clara had no illusions about the danger she faced, but she was ready. The final piece had been found, and the path forward was clear. She would not back down, the future was waiting, and Clara Whitmore was ready to unlock it. Clara's hands gripped the key tightly as she made her way back through Ashford Hall, every step echoing in the vast, empty corridors. Her heart raced in her chest, each beat a reminder of what lay ahead, of the dangers she faced, and the legacy she was about to uncover. The key wasn't just a physical object, it was a symbol, a doorway to a future that had been waiting for her, hidden within the fabric of the town she thought she knew. But now, everything had changed. The hallway felt colder as she approached the grand central hall, where the last of her great-grandfather's designs had been set into motion. The walls seemed to close in on her, the weight of the symbols etched into the stone pressing down like a silent reminder. She had always known that Ashford Hall was more than just a building. It had always felt like a puzzle, an enigma waiting to be solved. Now, with the key in her hand, she felt it more than ever, a key to understanding everything, to unlocking not just her grandfather's legacy, but the heart of Ashford itself. Clara reached the door to the old study, the room where her great-grandfather had spent countless hours drafting blueprints, making plans, and, it seemed, hiding his greatest secrets. The door was just as she remembered it, grand, ornate, but covered in dust and neglect. Yet now, it felt like a threshold, a boundary between the world she had known and the world she was about to uncover. She inserted the key into the lock, her fingers trembling as she turned it. There was a soft click, and the door swung open, revealing the study in all its faded glory. The room had once been a place of great thought and creativity, but now it stood still, as though frozen in time. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood and forgotten dreams. The desk, cluttered with old papers and half-finished sketches, sat at the far end of the room, untouched since her great-grandfather's last days. But it wasn't the desk that drew her attention, it was what lay on the wall behind it. There, on the wall, was a large, framed map of Ashford. But it wasn't just any map. It was a map that didn't appear to make sense at first glance. The roads and streets were drawn differently, the landmarks marked with symbols that mirrored the ones she had seen throughout the town. But at the center of the map, there was an area circled in red, a place that Clara recognized immediately, the heart of Ashford. It was not a place she had ever considered before. It was a small plot of land, just beyond the town square, near the edge of the forest. It seemed unimportant, forgotten by most of the townspeople. But now, Clara knew better. The symbols, the map, her great-grandfather's journal, it was all pointing to this one spot. She crossed the room quickly, her pulse quickening with each step. The map was the final piece, the last instruction that would lead her to the heart of Ashford, the heart of the legacy her great-grandfather had left behind. But as she approached the desk, something caught her eye, a small, nondescript envelope, tucked between the papers on the corner. It was sealed, marked only with the simple inscription, "For Clara." Her fingers shook as she picked up the envelope, the weight of it a reminder of how far she had come. She broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. "Clara," it began, in her great-grandfather's familiar handwriting. "If you are reading this, then you have unlocked the key to the next step. The journey is not easy, and the path forward is fraught with danger. But you must continue, not just for Ashford, but for the future of this country, for the ideals we believed in. The heart of Ashford is where everything begins. Do not hesitate. Trust the symbols. They will guide you. But remember, some truths are more dangerous than others. Do not let fear stop you, but do not be reckless either. There are forces that will try to stop you. They have always been there, watching. But if you are strong, if you hold fast to the truth, then nothing can stand in your way. Your great-grandfather, Thomas Whitmore." The letter fell from Clara's hand, and she stood there, frozen. The words rang in her ears, echoing like a warning. The path ahead was dangerous, she had known that all along. But now, it was real. The forces who had tried to bury the truth, to keep Ashford's legacy hidden, were closing in. And Clara was at the center of it all, but she couldn't stop now. Her great-grandfather's words resonated deeply within her. This wasn't just about uncovering Ashford's history. It was about something bigger. It was about ensuring that the truth of the past was not lost to time, that the vision of the architects of tomorrow, of a world where architecture was used to build a better future, was realized. Ashford was not just a town, it was the symbol of that vision, and it was her responsibility to protect it. With renewed determination, Clara grabbed the journal and the letter and turned toward the door. The path to the heart of Ashford was clear, but she knew the danger was only just beginning. The town had been hiding its secrets for too long. And now, it was time for the truth to be revealed. As she stepped out into the quiet streets of Ashford, the weight of what she had uncovered felt both empowering and terrifying. The map, the symbols, the key, they had led her here. But what awaited her at the heart of Ashford? She wasn't sure, but she knew she had to find out, and with that thought, Clara Whitmore set off toward the edge of the town, her footsteps steady and purposeful. The future was waiting. Clara's footsteps echoed in the quiet streets of Ashford, the town that had once felt so familiar now seeming foreign and distant. The weight of the letter she had just read hung heavily in her mind, and with it, the realization that she was not just uncovering the past, she was about to confront a future that had been hidden from everyone, including herself. The road ahead was murky, fraught with unseen threats and shadowy figures, but Clara knew she couldn't turn back. The heart of Ashford, the place marked on the map, circled in red, was where everything would come together. She walked faster now, driven by the urgency of her discovery. The town square passed by in a blur as she made her way toward the outskirts, where the forest began to encroach upon the town. The area marked on the map was just beyond the old, neglected cemetery, a place she had often walked by as a child, never giving it much thought. But now, it seemed like the entrance to another world, a world that had been hidden beneath Ashford's surface for decades. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the landscape as Clara approached the cemetery gates. The wrought iron fence was rusted, the stone pillars weathered by time. It was quiet here, too quiet. The stillness felt like a warning, and Clara instinctively glanced over her shoulder. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up as she continued forward, the feeling that she was being watched lingering in the air. She stepped through the gate, her breath steady despite the growing tension in her chest. The cemetery had long been abandoned by the townspeople, its graves overgrown with ivy and forgotten. But Clara wasn't here to mourn the past. She was here to unlock its secrets, to find the heart of Ashford. Her eyes scanned the area, looking for any signs of the hidden location she had come to find. The map had shown that the marked spot was near the cemetery's edge, near the woods that bordered the town. As she walked past the gravestones, she noticed something strange. One of the markers seemed out of place, its surface unusually smooth compared to the others. It was a simple stone, unadorned with names or dates, just a blank slab. The feeling that something was hidden here deepened. Clara knelt down, her fingers brushing against the stone. It felt cold beneath her touch, but there was a strange hum in the air around it, as if it were alive with energy. She pressed down, and to her surprise, the stone moved, just enough to reveal a narrow opening beneath it. Clara's heart raced as she slid the stone aside, revealing a small underground passage. She hesitated only for a moment before descending into the darkness. The air down here was musty and cool, the silence oppressive. Her flashlight illuminated the narrow corridor ahead, and Clara could feel the weight of the past pressing down on her. The walls were rough, uneven, and the passage seemed to wind downward, as though leading her deeper into the earth. She knew this was no ordinary tunnel, it was part of something much bigger. It was part of the hidden history of Ashford. The passage opened up into a large, cavernous room, the walls lined with stone. At the center of the room was a large, circular stone pedestal, and on top of it, a glass case. Inside the case lay a strange object, a key, identical to the one Clara had found in Ashford Hall. But this key was different. It wasn't just a symbol, it was the key to everything. The case was sealed, but Clara knew what she had to do. She stepped forward, her hands trembling as she approached the pedestal. The air in the room felt charged with energy, as though the very walls were alive, waiting for her to make the next move. As she reached out to touch the glass, the symbols carved into the walls began to glow faintly, illuminating the space with an eerie, otherworldly light. It was as if the room itself was responding to her presence, recognizing her as the one who had come to finish the work her great-grandfather had started. Clara carefully lifted the glass case and retrieved the key. It felt warm in her hand, almost like it was calling to her. She could feel its power, its purpose. This was it. The key to the future. And as she held it, she knew the final step was close, but before she could make her way back, she heard a sound behind her, a soft, unmistakable rustling. Clara's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't alone. She spun around, her flashlight sweeping across the dark room. The shadows seemed to move, and Clara's breath caught in her throat as she saw a figure standing at the entrance of the passageway. It was a man, tall, cloaked in darkness, his features obscured by the shadows. Clara's mind raced, recognizing the danger that had finally found her. "Clara Whitmore," the figure said, his voice cold and authoritative. "I've been waiting for you." Clara's grip tightened on the key as she took a step back. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the fear creeping into her chest. The man stepped forward, his presence overwhelming. "I'm someone who has been trying to stop this from happening for a very long time. You've already found more than you should have. But the truth you seek isn't meant for you to uncover." Clara's mind raced. The man's words were ominous, but she refused to show fear. This was it, the moment of truth. Her great-grandfather had warned her. The key she held wasn't just a piece of the puzzle, it was a weapon, a tool that could reshape the world. And now, it seemed, there were those who would do anything to stop her from unlocking its power. She backed toward the exit, the key still tightly gripped in her hand. "You can't stop me. This isn't just about Ashford. This is about the future. About everything my great-grandfather believed in." The man laughed softly, a cruel sound that sent chills down Clara's spine. "The future you're talking about is a fantasy. What you're doing is dangerous. People will die because of this." Clara felt a surge of determination. "Then it's a risk I'm willing to take." With that, she turned and ran, the sounds of her footsteps echoing in the cavernous room as she made her way back to the tunnel. She couldn't afford to stop. The future was within reach, and no one, not even this mysterious figure, would stand in her way. As she emerged into the light, Clara knew that the road ahead would be filled with more challenges, more secrets, and more dangers. But she was ready. The final piece of the puzzle had been revealed, and nothing could stop her from completing what her great-grandfather had started. Clara sprinted through the overgrown cemetery, her footsteps pounding in rhythm with her racing heartbeat. The key in her hand felt heavy, almost too heavy, as though it were pulling her forward towards something far beyond Ashford's quiet streets. She had uncovered the truth. But with it came the responsibility to see it through, to finish what her great-grandfather had started, no matter the cost. As she ran, the echo of the man's voice haunted her. "People will die because of this." But Clara knew that there were forces in this world that were more dangerous than ignorance. The truth, her great-grandfather's truth, could never be buried again. Not by fear, not by threats. The future, as he had always believed, depended on it. The dark figure in the underground chamber hadn't pursued her, but Clara knew he wasn't alone. Whoever they were, they had been watching her every move, waiting for her to get too close. But now, with the key in her possession, the game had changed. She wasn't just uncovering a mystery, she was rewriting history, challenging everything Ashford, and perhaps the world, thought it knew about its past. Clara reached Ashford Hall, the symbol of everything she had been trying to understand. The building, once a place of beauty and mystery, now felt like the heart of something much larger, something global, something revolutionary. She rushed inside, the key burning in her palm as she made her way to the central hall. The room was bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun, the light filtering through the stained glass windows, casting long shadows across the stone floors. She made her way to the pedestal in the center of the room, the pedestal her great-grandfather had designed as the final act of his vision. The carvings, the symbols, everything had led her here. To this moment, Clara placed the key into the lock, a simple brass mechanism hidden beneath the pedestal. There was no dramatic sound, no flash of light, just the faint click of the lock giving way. She turned the key and felt a surge of energy flood the room as the ground beneath her feet seemed to tremble slightly. With a deep breath, Clara pulled open the hidden compartment beneath the pedestal. Inside, she found what she had been searching for all along, a set of blueprints. These weren't just any plans. They were detailed, intricate diagrams of a new kind of city, a city built around the principles of art, architecture, and freedom. They were a vision for the future, a blueprint that would shape the world into something completely different from what it had become. These plans weren't meant to be built in a day, or even a generation. They were meant to be a long-term project, a guide for those who came after, for those who shared her great-grandfather's ideals. And now, it was Clara's responsibility to ensure that these plans didn't die with her. The architects of tomorrow were not just a group of dreamers, they were a movement, a vision that was as alive today as it had been when it was first conceived. As Clara traced the designs with her fingers, she realized that the plans weren't just architectural, they were a call to action. They were the framework for a new society, one where creativity, individuality, and human connection were valued above industry and mass production. The symbols, the blueprints, the journals, they had all been leading her to this moment, but just as Clara began to understand the true weight of what she was holding, a shadow fell over her. The man from the underground chamber, the one who had warned her of the consequences, stood in the doorway. His face was cold, unreadable, but Clara could see the anger in his eyes. "You don't understand, do you?" he said, his voice low and threatening. "You're playing with forces you can't control. You think you're helping the world, but you're not. You're destroying it. There are people who would kill to keep this from seeing the light of day." Clara stood tall, the blueprints still clutched in her hands. "You're wrong. The world needs this change. It needs these ideas, these principles. My great-grandfather believed it, and now I believe it too. You can't stop it." The man stepped forward, his shadow casting over her. "I don't need to stop it. You'll stop yourself. The truth is too dangerous, Clara. You've opened a door that was never meant to be opened." Clara didn't flinch. She had come too far to turn back now. "I'm not afraid of the truth." The man's eyes hardened. "Then you'll be the one who pays the price." Just as he took another step toward her, the sound of a car pulling up outside interrupted the moment. Clara's eyes flickered to the window, and her heart skipped a beat when she saw a familiar face, Thomas Avery, the man who had helped her all along, the one who had known her great-grandfather's secrets. He was here. The man in the doorway saw it too, and for the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. "You don't understand what you're doing," he repeated, though his voice lacked the same conviction as before. He took a step back, as though the appearance of Thomas had shifted the balance. Clara didn't wait. She grabbed the blueprints and turned toward the door, determined to make sure the world would see what had been hidden for so long. She wasn't just walking out of Ashford Hall, she was walking into the future. A future that her great-grandfather had dreamed of, a future that could change the world. Thomas entered the hall, his gaze immediately meeting Clara's. She didn't need to say anything, he knew what she had done, what she had found. His eyes were filled with pride, but also concern. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly. Clara nodded, holding up the blueprints. Ready to finish what he started. Ready to make the future a reality. As they walked out of Ashford Hall together, Clara's heart swelled with the certainty that her great-grandfather's vision would no longer be confined to the past. The world was changing, and she was part of that change. The symbols, the legacy, the fight, it had all led her here. Ashford, once a small town frozen in time, had now become the foundation for something greater. And Clara Whitmore had unlocked the future.